Hello, and welcome to I Am Dad Podcast with your fatherhood authority, Kenneth Braswell. 30 minutes of wisdom, information, resources, and nuggets to help you on your fatherhood journey. Or maybe you're just curious and want to hear some real talk about fatherhood, family, and the minds of men. Well, guess what? We got you too. Sit back, grab your pad and pen, and maybe even bring a little something to sip on. Enjoy 30 straight minutes of fatherhood, family, and fun with the fatherhood authority, Kenneth Braswell.
Welcome to I Am Dad Podcast. I'm your host, Kenneth Braswell. Thank you for joining us for another episode. Man, this year is going by so fast, right? That's all right. We're going to keep up with it as much as we possibly can. We are now in our fourth season. I don't know how many times I've told y'all that, but I've given you a charge for this fourth season. We've been trucking along, and everywhere I go, people tell me they listen, they love it, all this stuff, but I ain't seeing my subscribers going up. And so if you're going to take, 30 to 45 minutes of your life to listen to what we're talking about, take a couple of moments to look down at the bottom at that subscribe button and hit it, because that changes the algorithm and we begin to touch larger audiences. And that's what we want to do with this conversation of responsible fatherhood. But today on I Am Dad Podcast, we are honored to welcome Dr. Maretta McDonald, an award-winning teacher, psychologist, and one of the leading voices in the study of fatherhood and the criminal justice system. As an affiliate faculty member of Virginia Tech and adjunct assistant professor at St. John's University, Dr. McDonald has created groundbreaking courses like fatherhood and the criminal justice system, psychology and the family, and anti-Blackness across the globe. She is also a member of the Black Female Fatherhood Scholars Network and has published extensively on the historical and contemporary challenges of fatherhood. Before entering academia, Dr. McDonald worked as a child support enforcement officer and unit supervisor, giving her a rare and valuable perspective on how policies impact fathers and families firsthand. Most importantly, she is the proud mother of 3 fathers and a loving grandmother to 9 grandchildren. Her deep knowledge, personal experience, and commitment to rethinking fatherhood makes her an essential voice in today's conversation. So let's join as we dive into her research, her upcoming fatherhood and criminal justice system course, and the critical ways we can shape narratives around fatherhood and justice. Hey, Dr. McDonald, how are you doing? Let me take you off mute first. There you go. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I am so excited to be here. So excited. This podcast itself is a valuable resource that we're tapping into for the course I'm teaching. So now I wonder if I'm going to add it to my course next year, the one with me on it.
Yes, you are. We're going to set it up that way. When I saw your post, though, as I tell people, my baby jumped. It was kind of like when I saw it, I was like, ooh, wait, what is this? Let me stop real quick. So it wasn't even 2 minutes before I saw it and read it, before my fingers was like, I need you on right now because we need to talk about what this looks like. Because, one of the things that we've already always talked about is how schools of social work in particular have to begin to start including conversations about fatherhood in the academic teaching and rearing of our new social workers coming along, right? And so, but that has to happen across the board. But how do we get it happening in criminal justice if we can't even get it happening in social work? That's a whole nother conversation. We'll come back and talk about that one. But we start our podcast off with a interesting opening so that our audience gets to know you. You can tell this story from whatever angle you want to tell it from. It's your story. Tell us your daddy's story.
Oh, my daddy's story. Well, I wasn't a fatherless daughter, but I did not have a strong relationship with my dad until I was an adult. I grew up with another woman outside of my parents raised me, and they made sure that I had contact with my dad. But then when I was moved to California when I was 13, we lost touch. His house burned down. And I couldn't find him anywhere. There was no internet, right? And so it is funny that it was me being a child support worker that helped. So when I became a child support worker, child support workers can find people, right? And so I took those skills outside and I was like, wait a minute, let me see if I can find my own self daddy.
Mhm.
And I found him because he was a jazz singer. And so he had a performance in Chicago maybe 3 weeks before I started looking for him again. And I contacted the venue. They gave me the band director he was with, who happened to be my dad's cousin. And then he gave me my dad's number. And then I called. He didn't answer. I left a voicemail, right? And maybe an hour later, my dad called me back.
Wow.
He said, I have been looking all over for you.
Mm.
Your sister has been looking for you. And so, but I had gotten married. So they were looking for Maretta McDonald, but I was Maretta Jackson. But he didn't know because I hadn't been able to get in touch with him. And so, like, right then, like that was in July. Thanksgiving, me and all my kids and my husband at the time were on our way to Chicago, Indiana at the time, to see my dad. And I hadn't met my older brothers and sisters. I was his baby. And so my brother and sisters were there. All of my nieces and nephews, my great nieces and nephews. And so we all got to connect that Thanksgiving, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you could see the look on my dad's face when we were all in the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I got all my babies here,
Yeah.
And 2 years later, I lost him of cancer.
Mm-hmm.
2 years later.
Mm-hmm.
But I always say, for me, it's like God connected us again so I could be reconnected with my sisters and my brother and my nieces and nephews so that he could have his family one more time and then I could continue to be connected. So if that was the last thing he was able to do, he made sure that we had each other.
Mm-hmm.
That's my daddy's story.
Yeah, you and I have similar things that occurred in our lives with respect to shortly after meeting my dad. A couple of years after that, he passed away. But we didn't have a lot of interaction during that time. It was still broken, right? Because I hadn't seen him. It was 23. I always had to always describe when I met him again, or when I saw him again at 23. I always say the first time I met him for the second time. I always say that. And people are like, what? I'm saying, yeah, the first time I met him for the second time, because I don't remember the first times. I know that there was a couple of occasions to which I was with him, but can't recall any of them because I was so young. So when I met him at 23, that was my first time for the second time. And so, but shortly thereafter, a few years, he passed away, but we weren't able to really connect. And I'm writing a book now, which you're like, it's called Too Seasoned to Care, Why I Don't Give a about what you think about me anymore. And it's a book on the exploration on what things in our lives shaped how and who we are today. And so it's an exploration and going back and seeing how things. And I really chosen throughout the whole book not to talk about him because I'm writing another book after I finish with this one, and I didn't want to kind of cross some things, but I had to mention him because his absence was a huge part of what shaped me. But I was talking about his death and talking about how, for our children today, which is what we're going to talk about, we got to stop using terms like fatherless because there's no such thing as a fatherless child, because once you begin to tell your children that they don't have a father, they don't know how to explain that hole in their heart. Right. And so you have to give that hole some definition so that they know how to fill it when they get a chance to fill it. And you always have to know both stories. Your story is half the narrative. Like in order for it to be whole, you have to pull his narrative in. I'm curious because the other thing that you and I have in common is we cut our teeth a little bit in child support. And child support typically does something different to you, which is it makes you really anti-father as opposed to pro-father because you are it depends. What was it about child support that shaped or influenced how you thought about dads?
So I think for me, I've always been really community minded, right? I grew up in Chicago, and I like most of my personality, I feel like, really was formulated in Oakland when I became a teenager. That's where, like, I went to high school and everything. So I've always been really community minded.
Mm-hmm.
So as I was working and I saw how, like, when I'm in my office looking at my caseload, you know, everybody's represented. But then when I went in court, it was only black dads.
Mm.
So why is it only black dads? And so and that's actually one of the reasons I went back to school. And so, like, I was like, well, maybe this is the South, right? There's a lot of us more, we have a higher percentage of the population. So maybe that's it. Maybe because I'm in a rural area. Okay. But then I went to an urban area. I was like, still the same. Okay. And so for me, I always look like structurally at things.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, so why is it that it's 11 out of 11.5 men that are here are black? Why is that? Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because I felt like it was a structural problem, the way I addressed my caseload became very different.
Mm-hmm.
It was about mutual respect. It was about knowledge, disseminating knowledge. Like from the first day I meet you, I'll let you know exactly how the system works from beginning to end, so that you make informed choices, right? Because people will make choices, but if you're not informed, you know what I'm saying? Because what I saw a lot was that if I don't respond, it'll go away.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not how this works.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna let you know how it all works. Then you make the decisions. I'm gonna let you know what the power is what I could do. Then you make the decisions. So when I have to call on you, I'm gonna say, hey, we talked about this. I'm here. And in that way, it's like I felt like I was serving my community better,
Okay.
and I felt like I was giving dads a chance to, however they wanted to operate in the system, to operate that way because they had the knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
and like everyone is not going to choose to be compliant, but if you're informed and that's your choice, you are self-defining. And I'm big on self-definition, which is why one of the reasons I'm teaching this course is like, you define how you want to interact with the system, and you also know the consequences of those choices.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is how, like, it was for me at first. It was not about the dads themselves, but the effect that I saw the system was having an unequal impact on how dads were perceived, how dads were allowed to define themselves as fathers outside of their financial contributions.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to help in those ways.
Mm-hmm.
And that is also the way that I trained my staff when I was a supervisor. It's about respect. It's about knowledge, right? Let them know what's going on. Let them know, give them the steps, of everything from modification to, if you have your child, what you're supposed to do. If you're doubting if that's your child, what are you supposed to do? And so I actually, with that method, became like the top collector,
Mm-hmm.
and like my unit was a top performer.
Mm-hmm.
So, but because it was about treating people as people and letting them make those choices,
Yeah, it's kind of
instead of seeing them as a number,
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because when you get in there, because you came to the same epiphany I came to when I was with New York State Child Support, which is, this ain't even about child support. This is about something else. And where it deepened for me is in my direct service now with dads. And even when I was with child support, when my fatherhood program was a part of child support, and I was out with our grantees and working specifically with dads, and you're having conversation with them, 95% of your conversation is not about child support. It's about something else. Because what you learn about them is if they have the capabilities and they have the capacity, they're going to pay child support. It's not an issue with them not
right?
wanting to. It's them not having the
Exactly.
skill sets, the opportunities, and the capabilities to be able to do what you're asking them to do. And it's crazy
Correct.
because the societal narrative around them is that they don't want to, which is a complete
Correct.
lie. Like when you were working and you were seeing the dads that you were coming across, like how could you, when you were talking to them, tell that they were getting it?
They would look at you and they were like, okay.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It was that look like looking, you know how we
You can say it. We all you can.
you know how we do.
Yeah.
You know how we do. It's like we like,
Right.
oh, okay, this is what this is.
Right.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then you see them shoulders go back, and it's like you can see such a defeated look when you walk in those courtrooms, right?
Yeah.
The sadness, and a lot of times because it's like they work really hard to be dads,
Mm-hmm.
like they are out there at these schools, they are like helping with homework, they out there helping at practice, right? But because they don't live inside the home, the narrative is that they're absent,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
But how are you absent? Your child know who you are. Your child love you. Your child calling you on that cell phone, asking you to cash out them $20.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not absent.
Mm-hmm.
But the narrative is, if you're not inside the home, you're absent. But they're more often than not very active.
Yeah.
You know.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the look of like, I'm doing everything I can, but I'm still here. I'm still here.
Right.
I'm trying to be a great dad, but I'm still in court, and so, and that's where that knowledge kind of brings back some of that pride. You see, the shoulders go back up. Oh, okay. Okay. It makes a difference when when you can like give some knowledge or give information, and then they can see the whole picture
Mm-hmm.
instead of just how it's impacting them, like internally.
Yeah. One of the things I'm trying to get at now, we in Atlanta, we have a relationship with one of the chief judge magistrates that has
Mhm.
um allowed us and asked us to actually come into her court every Wednesday when
Mhm.
they're doing what they call child abandonment court. So
Mhm.
Georgia has this where the child support order can be turned into a criminal case,
Mhm.
and fathers get brought in because it's a debt
Mhm.
they owe, and they can get locked up right on the spot as a
Mhm.
result of that. But Dr. McDonald, one, I was there right before Christmas, and when we come in, she always has a sit like in where the jurors would typically sit because there's no one there. And so I'm like
Right.
right next to like the plaintiff's table, which is typically the mom. And
Mhm.
I was
Mhm.
sitting there, and this young lady's father came in, and you could tell he was struggling, but he wasn't getting it. And they put the
Mm.
cuffs on him, and started walking him off. And she turned and she looked at me, and her face was like,
Mhm.
this is not what I came in here for. This is not what I was
Mhm.
trying to accomplish. What I was trying to
Correct.
accomplish was to get to him, to let him know how desperately I need his support in this particular way, but I didn't want that to happen. And it was my heart crushed for both of them at that
Right.
moment. And my mind
Yeah.
was like, I gotta figure out, and maybe you can help me with this. Like, what
Mhm.
is the thing that got them there? Right? Why couldn't they
Mhm.
resolve and hash that out before they got entangled in the court? Have you thought about that or seen that when it's particularly in child support where you're looking at two parents and it's like they're mortal enemies and it's like, how did y'all get here?
And that is usually, in my experience, when they don't get it. It's like when their relationship is so tenuous that you see this as giving her money instead of it as a way to support your child. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to give her nothing. She don't deserve nothing. Um, and when it's in that way, usually they don't get it because like the narrative is often, well, I should be able to give this money directly to my child. You know what I mean? Instead of to the mother. And with being funneled through the mom is where the problem comes in. You know, first it's like, why the state in our business? Second is like, well, why I got to give her money? I can give straight with the child. I'll buy what the child needs. Just call and tell me what they need. You know, I got to give her money directly. And usually that is the piece that keeps it from like really connecting. You know, is that when those relationships get to that bad place, that there, and I often think that like an outside mediation may have get it, but like sometimes when those relationships have gotten that bad, then you're not even thinking about how y'all relationship outside of this court affects the child, right? Because when we can think in that way, it can maybe minimize some of it. But we're not even thinking enough in the way of say, okay, if I'm not getting along with her, children see everything. It's going to give them anxiety. It's going to make them upset. It's not good for the child. How can we figure out to at least be cordial for the sake of the child? Then these other things can maybe build onto it. But it's like, once those relationships go that awry, usually there's a problem that we can't get to.
Absolutely. But you've decided to get out of the administration like I did. I was like, I got to get back to God's work. I got to get out of this space. Thank you for incubating me, because that's what happened when I was there for the 4.5 years. I learned the system. I understood the system clearly from the county level to the state level to the national level. Like, I know child support in ways that people don't know child support, right? And now that I've been in this work around fatherhood, I connect those dots and make sense out of like what's going on. But you moved into thinking about the criminal justice space. And so I'm curious as to why that was a track that you thought you can have an impact on this particular work.
Because for me, I saw it as the melding of the welfare system and criminal justice system. It's like bringing issues of the family directly into the criminal justice system. Because like you said, people go to jail. You know what I'm saying? And like, but there's the protections that people of the criminal justice system have do not exist in the family court space. They cannot get a public defender. The courts have ruled they don't, because it's technically civil, even though they can go to jail. The way the jail part is done is like they don't qualify for the protection of a public defender. And so, but you get all of the punishment. So now you have you have an arrest record, you have a mugshot, things that can be pulled up, which can further constrain your ability to show up as a dad in all these other ways, right? And so that's the relationship that I really investigate. Like when I went back to school, I went back in criminal justice. My undergrad degree is in criminal justice. And so I wanted to see how the systems were similar, how this worked. And I was like, wow. So it's very similar. And a lot of it is, as we know about some law, a lot of it is about social control, right? And so one of the ways I looked at the child support system from a practitioner at the local level was that it was about social control and how ideologically fathers have these expectations of a breadwinner provider in the home. And if you are anything outside of that, then you're punished for it. And the way you're punished for it is through the child support system and other systems like child welfare, how, dads are not automatically contacted when their child ends up in foster care. Like, they're not, like, so, but why?
Yeah.
So it's like, it's because it's this whole, you are not in the home breadwinner provider. So you're erased in these other realms, right? And so And it's like, since you don't want to be married in a home, then this is how we are going to stigmatize you in these ways.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what, so when I went back to school, I'm like, and that's what I was like, I want to study. Why am I? So was it just because I was in the South that all the men in the course were black? Is it? Because then I'll let it go. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, I know. I did all the research. And so like, it's not.
Mm-hmm.
And so now for me, because like I said, I'm community minded. And I look at structure. I'm like, so now why? And then as I read and read, I started making a connection. Oh, so, they've been controlling our ability to be a father since slavery. They were controlling the ability to be a father in Jim Crow. So it's like, okay, this is just another, it could be considered another form of social control of Black men's ability to self-define themselves as a father. And so like, okay. And so that's how I got into this work.
Yeah, and you came from like you grew up in, growing up in Oakland was a different experience. I know for your generation because we talking 60s, 70s, right? Panthers, Black hit. We
Yeah.
talking the movement, right? We
Yes. It
talking
was
things
there.
popping, in this
Yeah.
country. And in California was somewhat different than the East Coast because there was more of a free-willing spirit with respect
Mm-hmm.
to defiance,
Mm-hmm.
right? It
Right.
looked different in New
Yeah.
York. Panthers look different in New York than Panthers in California, right? My
Yes. Right.
dad was
Right.
in the my stepfather was in the movement and went to jail as a result of it. But they were about some
All
different
right.
things on the East Coast
Yeah.
because they had closer proximity, particularly in New York
Mm-hmm.
City, to the Malcolm paradigm, right?
Right.
And the Martin
Right.
paradigm. So it was a different
Mm-hmm.
kind of rebellious kind of we ain't gonna take
Right.
this no more kind of thing there. And then in
Mm-hmm.
California, I'm thinking that the spirit was a little different. Having that background, how did you think that background and upbringing kind of made you think specifically about Black dads?
I think because, like you said, Oakland has this like real big spirit of resistance, right? And in addition to community building at the same time,
Mm.
right? Because we're talking about free lunch, we're talking about all the like preliminary, like almost Head Start kind of things, right? And so we know that it was about men actually looking after children,
Mm.
free lunch, free breakfast for children before they go to school, I had, programs for little ones, right? And so, but like also seeing a lot of like just dads just roaming around. One of my famous memories is like at the gas station in the early 90s. And there was a song that came out, and this dad, it was We Belong Together. It was, so it might have not been the early 90s, but it was We Belong Together by Mariah Carey.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this dad with tattoos, chest tattoos. He was sitting in front of like a cougar, like rims, and had his baby singing to the baby, We Belong Together, in the gas station.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
For me, that was the dopest thing I had ever seen in my life. Because without that baby in his hands, you would have read him for somebody else,
Right. Right. Right.
But he's singing We Belong Together to his baby.
Mm-hmm.
You can't tell me nothing about daddies after that. You can't tell me nothing
Right.
about that.
Yeah.
It don't matter what they look like. It don't matter where they come from. When dads connected with their children, it evolves men in a whole new way
Right.
than they even imagine.
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
It don't make you softer. It don't make you a weakling. It don't make you none of that. The different kind of strengths that you embody when you become your identity now becomes part of being a father.
Mm-hmm.
The strength, the protection, the way you like to see dads like right now on social media, to see dads like that used to be like on the block having tea parties. Come on now.
Right.
It involves you in a whole nother way that you never would have expected or accepted somebody to tell you was going to do 5 years ago, until this 5-year-old said, Daddy, come play with me, and you ain't going to say no.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so when you're thinking about this, the whole criminal justice thing in that same conversation is this returning citizen thing, right? And so they get caught up in those systems, and now they got to come home. And that expectation doesn't change for them, right? It doesn't change. In fact, it's immediate. As soon as you come home, you got to readjust because you got an obligation that society expects you to adhere to. And so how much of that is caught up in our thinking with respect to when we look at Black fathers overall, looking at this population of fathers that are coming back into community that now have to integrate with a family that don't really know them anymore?
And that is actually one of the reasons that I'm teaching this class, right? So it is a class that's situated in the criminal justice discipline, right? Most of my students are criminal justice majors. And so they have like aspirations to be police officers, FBI, lawyers, probation, parole, right? And they probably came to this class thinking it was something like about how being a criminal or being involved in the criminal justice system and fathers end up in jail and things like
Yeah,
that.
let's talk
Which
about.
is
Do
not
me a
how
favor
this
first.
class
Do me a
is at
favor and
all.
describe the pro, because I was leading into that. But since we in it
Okay.
now, I want you to take a step back, talk about the class, the course, what it is, why you came to do it, and then we can ease into that space. I want to make sure that the horse is before the cart.
Okay. So the purpose of this class, since I started teaching, I've wanted to teach this class. Because it discusses fatherhood as a male identity and a personhood. And it's like that does not involve money, financial contributions, and fatherhood is often not even considered in other ways outside of that. But it becomes identity that impacts all aspects of life, right? And so I wanted to talk about how, like I said, structure, how the criminal justice system as a system impacts the identities of fathers, right?
Okay.
And so it's not about, it's not just about returning home. In this course, we start with talking about, so what in America, how do we define what a father is, right? So we look at the way that fatherhood is framed in the United States. Then we go on and say, okay, that's predominant, but so how are Black fathers framed? How are Latino fathers framed? How are Indigenous fathers framed, right? And so what are the constraints based on their marginalization that impacts their fatherhood, right? So we get all of that background down, right? And then we say, okay, we take this identity, and now we're going to talk about what these different parts of the criminal justice system can do to that identity, right? And so we're going to start with the first topic we're talking about, because it starts with policing, right? It starts with policing in our neighborhood, our neighborhoods being over policed, and how that affects fathers' sense of ability to protect, how that impacts their ability to, and their masculinity, you know. Then we move on to like, so how does being incarcerated impact fathers, right? Like they don't stop being a father because they're incarcerated, right? So how do these constraints, being behind these walls, the paywalls for phone calls, the how much your letters are screened, how do all of these things impact the ability to be a father, right? Then we move on to reentry, right? Then we talk about all the constraints of reentry, from housing to employment to visitation to If your child ends up in a child welfare system and you have a record, how does all of that impact your ability their ability to be a father, right? Then we move on to child support. Then we move on to child welfare, right? But like I said, I think those are integrations of the family and criminal justice system. So we move on to there, right? Then we talk about programs that are out there to help fathers, right? You know, we talk about fatherhood programs. We talk about reentry programs, and we are. And one of the last project they have is in their group to develop a program.
Okay.
That in their mindset, from what we've learned, that will try to reduce some of the constraints that happens because of having some kind of involvement with the criminal justice system on any of the levels we talk about. Develop a program, a policy, or a protocol that will help bolster father identities and remove or lessen the systemic constraints. And so and part of this class is also important to me is that they hear directly from dads themselves, right? So which is why I have your podcast on there, right? And the first podcast they were assigned is from like there's a podcast from dads that are directly in prison, and they're talking about fatherhood themselves, right, as being incarcerated. And so that was the first thing I wanted them to hear to set up this class. Not the statistics on fathers, not how many dads are in jail, because we're going to get to that. But I want you to hear from them and how being a father still means so much to them no matter where they are. So so what I'm hoping this class achieves, right, is that these are people that are going to go into these industries, right? And they're going to have a lens that their coworkers aren't. And they can start like making suggestions and thinking about how this is going to affect fatherhood in their professional careers, so that we can start moving this thing, slowly but sure, and churning it. They don't, because they're brilliant. These students are really, really smart. And so they can develop ways to, insert some father-friendly or, maybe even when we know it's a dad, can we do some more diversion instead of it, And so, and those kind of things into their thought.
Now, you're going to be two things. One, we want everybody to know that this course is going to take place at Virginia Tech.
It's taking place right now.
It's taking place right now at Virginia Tech, and Dr. McDonald is going to invite me to come to Virginia Tech and speak to her students at some point. And I'm coming when you ask me. Whenever you want me to come, I'm coming. That's a promise to you. But I have to have timing to do it.
Okay. Okay.
So, the other thing is, you're a researcher, right? So you're doing this class, but I know in your mind you're thinking, how am I going to research this too, right? Because I want to be able to tell the impact that this class is having on my students. Have you thought about that, or is it already included?
It's basically included.
Okay.
So each week, they have to give me a debriefing memo. So as if I'm the agency director, and I gave you these readings, right? I said, can you go and summarize these readings and tell me how this would impact the dad? And then tell me what, and if it were your dad or your father figure in your life or your brother, as a dad, tell me how this would impact them, right? Because I want them to personalize it. I want them to hypothesize it in a frame that affects their lives directly, right? And so I want to see, as they learn more, what are the suggestions? What are the things that they talk about that's different from when they start the class? And so I'm using those issue memos to see, and then the big project, which is like a culmination of all the memos, when I want them to get together and develop a program. So how are they weaving fatherhood into these programs that they want to develop, this policy they want to address, and weave fatherhood in? So I'm trying to see how the thinking along this 15 weeks become more natural and automatic to include dads and think about dads when they're doing it. So that is the way that I'm using it to like kind of see how the mind frames, if and whether there are being adjusted and changing.
Okay. I see the plan coming together. I see it coming together. And then the next step is, how can we support you? How can I support you? Because I think that once this is all done, then this has got to be moved into the public space, because other collegiate academic institutions around the country should be doing similar activities in their schools.
I agree, because I'm not one of those people that like, oh, these my because that doesn't help the community.
Right.
Hoarding ideas does not help the community.
Right.
I have 20 students in my class, and I believe, if 20 students reach 5 people, that'd be great. But if someone else takes this curriculum and situates it in their community, right, and situates it over here, right, and I'm planning to also put it on my website, because I really don't believe in play walls, like, because their final project is actually to make a social media post about what they learned, because I believe in sharing knowledge outside of the paywalls, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to put the reading list and stuff up. I just haven't figured out how to do that. And so maybe, but I want to like talk about what we're learning while we're learning it. And I want to like put the readings out and say, okay, this is what we're reading this week, and give people in criminal justice, dads themselves, so they know that they're seen and know that we're talking about these things,
Right.
to like be part of the conversation. Because my world is this big, I don't know how to do that yet, and so I'm going to try to figure it
Well,
out.
let's talk offline. I'll figure out how
Okay.
to make that happen for you, because this is important stuff. This is unique, which is, like I told you, when I saw this, you post this, my whole baby jumped, and I was like, oh, I need to be in this game. I need to be in this game, coach. And so, because I need to figure out how we begin to start influencing our higher academic institutions to begin to be leaders in including fathers in the conversations around family.
Correct.
One of the other things too, we're in this space now, Dr. McDonald, where there's a lot of conversation around DEI efforts and race and all these other things, and people are running scared because they don't want to talk about Black people, Latino people, whatever the case may be. And I just wrote an op-ed piece where I was really basically saying there ain't nothing about anything that I do that has anything to do with DEI. It is as a result of who I serve and who my community is. They just happen to be Black, and there's nothing else I can talk about. I don't have the perspective of talking about other communities other than in my national work, where that's part of my work to do. So I can do it if I need to. But when I'm here in Metro Atlanta, it is what it is. And so as you begin to move this work into more broader spaces, and people begin to start saying, well, what does this have to do with this population and what this population? How do you respond to that? How do you remain focused? Because I love in your bio, I don't even know where this thing came up. You said, I'm the mother of 3 fathers. That's unique. I love that. You're going to hear me say that more, because that changes someone's mindset when they think about you. It's a very different connotation of when you say, I'm the mother of 3 sons and I'm the mother of 3 fathers. When you say, when I read that, I was like, you got to talk to me about how you got to that, and why do you think that's important for you to say that in that way?
One, because I'm not a dad. I had a dad. I was married to a dad, but like, I'm not a dad. And so, and you've talked to one of my colleagues about this, about women doing research on fathers. Like, it's usually questions. So, what you know about dad that you want to do research? And so, like, I don't know about being a dad, but I have sons that are fathers, and I want to support them in their journey to be the best dads they can be. And so, whatever systems I can help dismantle, whatever information I can give them, whatever support I can find for them, I'm going to do it. And so, but I don't want it to just affect my 3 sons. I want it to affect all the dads, because I look at structure and I know that personal choice has a lot to do with it. But a lot of our choices are constrained by structures outside of our control.
Right.
And so, like I said, like if you know some of this, then you can maybe bob and weave a different way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then you could. And so it's very important for people to know I have sons, but they are all dads. You know,
Yeah.
they all love their children. A couple of them have been part of the criminal justice system, and this was after I even started studying it. Right,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't start studying it because they were involved. They were kids. So, but like now they've had involvement,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, like, and for me, it's like I think it's important that that part of me in this work is known. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that I am personally invested in this work.
And that's the best way to do this work, right? Gotta have some skin in the game, right? It's
Correct.
really, you think about it, and someone asked me a question about how I got into this work. I'm like, most people who get into not-for-profit work come through it through their own pain point, right?
Mm.
Most people who
Mm.
are in homeless
All right.
programs were homeless. Most people who are in substance abuse programs were substance abusers. Most people who are in
Mm-hmm.
the DV field were domestic violence, survivors. And that's how
Oh.
that's how life happens. Most people that are,
Mm-hmm.
concerned about, breast cancer had breast cancer or know somebody who had
Mm-hmm.
breast cancer. That's how the
Right.
world works. When you have a pain point, you work through your pain point, and then you want to
Exactly.
make sure that other ones don't have to deal with the same level of pain that you had too, which
Exactly.
is so it's
Exactly.
really crazy when people look at an organization and say, oh, you're only concerned with Black dads. No, I'm concerned with the pain point that I experienced. And that pain point
Correct.
happened to be through the lens of a Black dad. And that is
Right.
my reality. Now, I could talk to others about my
Mm-hmm.
pain point, but they may not get the subtle nuances of the differences in how it impacted me as opposed to
Mm-hmm.
how it impacted them. That you have to come to your own understanding on.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love everything about this. Goodness, I love everything about it. And I was looking at the curriculum. I was like, oh, okay, we got to figure out how to scale, because that's the next level, right? The next
Yeah.
level is
Yeah.
how do you help the next person, the next person, and the next person? I
Right.
think we're
Right.
doing a lot of great work in the space. When you look at the space of responsible fatherhood, because you're also part of the Black Female Fatherhood Network, I believe that's
Mm-hmm. I am. Yeah.
like, why is that work important for you? Because we just talked about women being involved in fatherhood, and people always have questions, but I'm like, they should be involved in fatherhood. But you know what?
Mm-hmm.
Men should be involved in motherhood conversations too, and we're not. That
Right. Why though?
well,
Why?
so, and this is you getting ready to walk us into a whole nother podcast.
Okay. I'm gonna back
But
it
I'm
off.
gonna mention, I'm gonna tell you why I think. And then we
Okay.
got to come back, and we have to bring some
Okay.
more colleagues, and maybe we might have to just have a panel discussion on this, right? Which would
Okay.
be a great
Right.
panel discussion.
Yeah.
I think it is about the safety factor, and it is the overall thought about safety concerns when it comes to men and women. Think about this, the mentoring space.
Mm-hmm.
People are really comfortable with allowing women to be mentors to boys.
Okay.
But rarely do you ever hear them talk
Mm-hmm.
about making sure that girl mentees have men mentors. And it's a safety factor. Is warranted to think about, but it's not warranted to overarch what it is we're talking about. And the reason that I always say that is because of my own daughters.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and I
Mm-hmm.
can see where my influence has influenced their lives as a dad, but not only as a dad, in those small moments where I'm serving as a mentor to them in some other
Right.
capacity, and giving
Correct.
them
Right.
a variable of my own understanding that they're not gonna get from another woman,
Right.
right? And
Right.
so when you
Yeah.
isolate them,
Mm-hmm.
girls
Mm-hmm.
who don't have active men and fathers in their lives, how do you
Mm-hmm.
expect them to go out into the community and function in a healthy way with both men and women when they don't have real experience of dealing with men. Because so I
Right.
think it's a safety factor, and that safety factor is both mental and physical.
Mm. And you know, I and thinking like I think structure, thinking about structurally how we attempt to separate people based on this is a man, this is a girl, and because of global narratives, because there are threats to women, right?
Absolutely.
There are threats, right?
Hmm.
But like there are also benefits, and so like I remember third grade, Mr. Rose, right?
Hmm.
Mr. Rose was my teacher. Mr. Rose had to be 7, 8 feet tall. Probably not. I was short.
I was getting ready to say for a 4 feet person that they could seem like they know.
I'm sure he was 8 foot tall. He had a Jerry curl. He wore bell bottoms. Mr. Rose made me feel so confident in my intelligence. He encouraged me to join the band because he knew I loved music. Like I got into like math contests because I kind of hid that I was smart in order to be cool with the other kids because I'm short and nerdy and wear glasses. And so like, but Miss Rose was like, "You're so smart." I'm like, "For real?"
Right.
And like, it wasn't like my first and second grade teacher didn't tell me that.
Right.
And why I don't remember their names.
Mm.
I remember Mr. Rose though.
Yeah.
And so like, and even when we talk about in the research space, which is a different space than a one-on-one mentorship. And like one of my biggest mentors, his name is Dr. Pate. He's at University of Wisconsin. Like one of my biggest cheerleaders and supporters is Dr. Pate. And like there are ways as he's helped me think about fatherhood and Black men that I never would have thought about without his mentorship.
Right.
And he studies child support too. And I would not, no one that I knew studied it. And if I hadn't come across him and he hadn't been willing to mentor me, we wouldn't be sitting here probably.
Mm.
I probably would have had to shift what I studied because I didn't have anyone to help me guide me that way. And so, and all men got moms. So it's like, they should be like talking about the importance of mom, which actually is a way to support women,
Absolutely. Yeah. Two
but we ain't gonna talk about that no
Yeah,
more.
2
We
things.
gonna do a
Yeah,
panel.
we gonna
That's
put
just
together a panel discussion to talk about that. 2 things.
yes.
My podcast that's coming up on Sunday, that's airing this Sunday,
Okay.
is Dr. Pate.
Okay.
Dr. Pate.
I know you
No, I'm
joking.
not. It's Dr. Pate. He's coming to his is airing this Sunday coming up at 8 o'clock. And so I've known well, we both have known him for a while. Him and his awesome wife too has done some incredible work
Jackie is amazing.
around the child support specifically around the
Yeah,
country. I believe that the two of them have never gotten their just due. That's just from
I
me
don't think
standing
so.
on the outside looking in.
Correct.
But I also know why, because their work is so provocative. Has always been extremely provocative, but that's
Mhm.
what researchers are supposed to be, right?
We want to push the limits of people's thinking.
Yeah.
This is a different way to think about this issue.
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
And so let's weave this into how policies are set up, how we set up programs. This is additional knowledge that you can factor in. Is what it shouldn't be like just repeating what everybody else is saying.
Yeah. The other thing is, I think, and I know that this can be done. Me and Dr. Rollins have talked about this, and it's like, as we're talking about the more traditional academic institutions around the country, that we are trying to encourage to begin to talk more about fatherhood.
Mhm.
Where we should really be leaning in and leaning on when it comes to Black communities is HBCUs. Why are we not talking to them about why you're not talking about
Right.
fathers in your institutions?
That is so true. Yeah.
Right.
Because I like in one of my other classes I teach a lot of the boys, right? And it's like that's where a lot of our studies of our Black family came from.
Right.
Nobody was studying us.
Right.
They would talk about us, but they weren't doing any studies on us. So that's where the realm of knowledge on Black people and family came from. we need to get back to
Right,
that.
'cause I would
Like,
love to know what family formation looks like amongst HBCU students.
mm-hmm.
What kind of families
Yeah,
are they coming from overall across the country? And I would guarantee
right.
you that most of them are coming from married relationships,
I think so too, probably. Mm-hmm.
which would be just a study in and of itself to kind of really kind of talk about achievement, right? Which is,
Right.
when we talk about the understanding that, children that are raised in married households fare better. That's a given. We know that. But I think that when we have those conversations around particularly marriage and the construct that is pushed on us now, is that we want to talk about marriage as the destination, but we don't want to talk about marriage as the journey. Those are two different things.
Mm-hmm.
You can get
Mm-hmm.
married without the journey that turns disastrous.
And that's what I was going to, because I want to push back on you a little bit about growing up in married families
For the
and
most part,
always.
it ain't perfect research.
But I'm just saying though, like, because one of my friends got a study that shows it's about resource and support being the same. Like saying that
Resources within married couples.
like if a single mom has similar resources and access as a married couple, the children's
Really?
outcomes. I'll send you the article. Dr. Christina Ross, she is at Harvard now, and it's like, and most of the time they fare better because they're in multiple generation homes, like with a grandma
Huh.
and the mama and the baby. That additional layer of support, additional layer of economic resources.
Yeah.
So,
That's a podcast. I need to know her quick. Quick. Because that's that's the narrative that's being pushed right now. Is the narrative is,
mhm,
that, that coming out of a married household is the golden grail or whatever they want to call it. It's the
mhm,
pinnacle of
mhm,
how our children do well. And
right.
so, and it's interesting because earlier you were talking about something, and I was thinking in my head that one of the assets that we need to begin to start thinking about with respect to all families, but more specifically about Black families, is our ability to be connected with opportunities.
Exactly. Exactly.
Right, which can add,
And more
which
opportunities,
can
right?
be a resource, but being connected and being in a space where you are connected with more opportunities matter.
Yes, it does. From tutoring to good quality child care to, having dads be able to have paid time off without getting fired.
Mm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
because I've known dads in my personal life and professional life that were single dads raising children and have to take off for a doctor's appointment, have to take off for a school thing, and were asked, her mama can't do it. You ain't got a sister, your mama can't do it.
Mm.
And was fired because they took off too much in a way that moms would never be dismissed. So, we have to really change minds about how fathers are allowed to show up
Right. Yeah.
on a structural level,
Mm-hmm. Listen, I'm gonna have to get you off this podcast. You done gave me 3 more conversations I gotta have. Tell people how they can get in touch with you and find out more about your work.
So I have I'm on Instagram as the Doctor with a AH McDonald.
Mhm.
And also on do we still got TikTok? I'm on TikTok
Mhm.
and Snapchat with that same name, the Dr. McDonald.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you so much. Oh my goodness. I can't wait to be able to talk more about your work and how this thing is gonna fare out and how this thing is gonna change the landscape of the work that we do. And
Yeah.
to all of my I Am Dad podcast listeners, you know how I like to leave you. Always be kind to others as you are kind to yourself, or you might find yourself by yourself. Always shoot high for your goals, because even if you miss, you'll be amongst the stars. And as my good friend and mentor, Art Mitchell, used to always say to me, Kenny, it's nice to be important, but you know what? It's much more important to be nice. Till next time, next Sunday, God bless you. Have a great week and peace out.
Thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us. You've been listening to I Am Dad podcast. We hope that you have been informed, encouraged you to think, or even inspired your heart for the love of dads. The conversation does not end here. Come back and join us next week. Same time, same place. Or you can continue the dialogue on our I Am Dad Facebook page. We also invite you to listen to past episodes, learn more about us, and keep up with special activities by visiting IamDadPodcast.com. That's IamDadPodcast.com. Until next time, I leave you with this reminder of manhood from 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 11. When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. Because of this reminder, I will always understand that I am dad, period.